All right, there we go.
Okay.
So we dialed in.
And so in today's recording, we're planning on talking about a few different things that are considered sort of controversial. Say one being coffee. Coffee is, well, like you were saying before we started recording this, Tommy, coffee is one of the #1 addictions in the world, but it's an addiction that we're okay with.
Socially acceptable.
Yeah, we have a few other things that we're going to talk about, but yeah, let's start with coffee, right? Let's see how we go.
100%. So, my interest in having a discussion with coffee. By the way, guys, this forum, this particular way we're going to do things is, it's mostly, I'm going to be leaning on you to have a bit more insight, and I'm more going to be prodding for discussion and sharing my known insights. So I'm not going to overqualify myself on my points, but our interest in this coffee discussion is because it's got to be the most widely consumed beverage worldwide now. Now, I know tea is up there, but we're going to remember that if we're talking about tea, are we specifically talking about black tea? Are we specifically talking about the one form of origin of black tea that we primarily get from the middle continent, right? Because tea is so damn vast. But when we're talking about coffee, we are definitely talking about the coffee bean that is caffeine rich. So yeah, we thought we'd go deepish on coffee today because there's a lot of positive rhetoric around it and thoughts around it. Obviously, I think it's loaded with a lot of bias. I think it's a great way of defending a mega industry. And I think it's also, do we really think that society, corporations, businesses, and humans are going to paint it with a bad light when it props up their productivity, focus, and so on? So, yeah. So let's open a few can of worms. We're not here to say how bad it is, but we're here to kind of let's actually objectively discuss some of the possible negatives. Yeah. So I'll hand it over to you, Jay, for a minute, and you can elaborate on just what I've kind of touched on there, Jay. And meanwhile, I'm drinking a coffee.
Yeah. I'm also not a great subject when we're trying to pull apart coffee. I also had a lot of caffeine today. Probably see me jump around a bit.
And this is probably a really important point as well. Let's cut straight to it in terms of that point. The real issue is caffeine. Let's just paint. Would that be right, Jay? Because it's coffee in and of itself is not an issue. I'm not seeing much of an issue, but the most people are drinking coffee for the effects of caffeine. So let's just hone in on that. And people are drinking excess coffee for excessive effects of caffeine. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. With all the substances that we consume, it is for the effect. Let's not get that all confused. We don't.
No one's drinking beers to get hydrated.
Exactly. It's nice to believe that it's a delicious tasting substance.
I do like the taste, but again, that could be an adaptive thing over time, and it could be the waters are muddy due to the response I get. So when I taste that flavor, my brain associates that flavor with incoming caffeine buzz. So there's a lot of little bits and pieces we can kind of unpack there. And so you're totally right. I don't believe we started drinking coffee for the taste. We consumed it for the effects.
Yeah. It is definitely the association. Like you said, the association is important, and the feeling that we get afterwards rather than the actual taste itself. But given that association, we can consider it a tasty beverage. Yeah, so let's address it. The difference between caffeine and coffee.
Cool.
So caffeine is the stimulant itself, the chemical that interacts with our body. Coffee being the substance created from the bean. So a reason that I want to distinguish the difference between the two is because when we look at studies, or we look at blogs online or hear the videos, we'll tend to consider them the same thing. When someone is doing a study on caffeine, we'll hear that and just say, sweet, I can drink as much coffee as I want because caffeine does this, caffeine does that, or vice versa. Now, it's a little bit, it gets a little bit mixed up here when we start talking about the real benefits of coffee. The real benefits of coffee, they tend to stem around the polyphenols, so the antioxidant effect that you get from drinking coffee. That is primarily one of the most positive aspects of coffee, polyphenols. If you don't consume many antioxidants in the rest of your diet, say you don't eat much fruit, you don't eat many veggies, like you're just eating a shit diet, let's go with that, then drinking a coffee is probably going to be your best defense against free radicals. And so great. That's one positive thing we've got there that leads to a bunch of flow-on effects afterwards.
Cool. Like also probably the quality of the product you're consuming is probably reasonably important too. What if you're drinking instant? I'm not imagining by the time it's processed that far, you're really getting much out of it. You know, you're consuming something that's so heavily distilled down to this basic form for the most convenient consumer. You know, also, yeah. So yeah, that's great. Let's carry on. Let's carry on.
Yeah. So, like you touched on there, like the quality and the source is incredibly important, depending on where it's come from, how it's been processed, how it's traveled to get to you. We often hear about mycotoxins or the mold that accrues on the coffee, aflatoxin B1 and ochratoxin A. If we don't roast the coffee appropriately or the beans appropriately, say you might have a higher amount of those mycotoxins, say you don't roast them enough. But then if you're going to roast it too much, then you're going to end up with carcinogens in your coffee. Just like all things that we cook too much, we're going to end up burning the shit out of it.
Burn carbon, bro.
Yeah. It's like
we're just
drinking
people
dust.
who cook the shit out of their steaks.
Yeah, I like it roasted. When you're better off having it blue.
Yeah.
So it's important, and you can taste the difference when you go to a decent cafe or decent coffee place.
Yep. You know, a good example of like cooked to shit is like the Greg's factory down here in Dunedin, which you can smell clearly. Mass production, you can just smell the burnt bitter bean in the air down in the Studentville area. Another example of people who overcook their beans is like All Press. All Press do everything to a dark roast. Dark roast is just a lazy term for overcooked. It just hides any of the inconsistencies in like very specific roast. Have you got anything with respect to, like, you know, obviously people are quite mindful of things like gut health, maybe like the functioning of your guts. So like what's like the acidity like in coffee? What are the kind of what are the potential interactions in the gut? Have you got anything or any ideas on that, Jay?
I'm not actually too well versed on the effects of the microbiome, the effects of coffee on the microbiome. I know sort of from what I remember, you kind of want to have like that slight acidic taste to your coffee. You don't want it to be too alkaline, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Have you heard much about the microbiome when it comes to drinking too much coffee?
No, it's got a good bitter taste. I haven't come much on that literature at all. I also haven't covered anything that has like shown me that people with like say things like rising stomach acid or irritable bowel syndrome or anything like that. It doesn't seem to propagate any particular issues or interactions with those things.
I could take a stab in the dark.
Okay, take a stab in the dark. We're not here for perfect science, man.
Yeah, well, if I was to take a guess, I know we're all used to that sort of irritable feeling that you get when you have a shit coffee or you drink too much coffee or you run straight to the bathroom or everything feels a bit loose. So I would imagine, given that you're creating a bit of
it's going to be a diuretic, right?
It's going to be a diuretic. You're probably going to mess with your electrolytes there. You're probably not going to digest things properly. I know that you will, if you raise your cortisol levels too much, you tend to burn off a considerable, probably a bad way of describing it, you use up a certain amount of magnesium. Magnesium levels in the body drop. You're also going to have a massive flow-on effect of that lack of magnesium. It causes almost like a positive feedback loop, where lack of magnesium can also result in the body feeling irritable, the muscles getting tense. It's almost like the same effect that you tend to get when you have too much coffee, when you're not sleeping well. It tends to be the same effect that you get when you have not enough magnesium in the system.
True. Yeah. They're essentially, it's essentially kind of like somewhat the same thing.
Yeah. Yes. If we ditch the magnesium idea, just the irritation in the gut lining, that's going to mess with your microbiome downstream too.
Yeah. If we so for example, I started drinking coffee when I was about 18. I'm 36 now, so it's a good 18 years on the trot. The short-term effects, we all know the short-term effects. We'll go into like short and mid-term and possible long-term effects, bro, because I'm inclined to believe, if possible, there's got to be some, obviously levels of exposure, so how much you're drinking, how long, how consistently, and so on and so forth. For example, we all know the short-term effect. You have a coffee and you feel perked up, right? So why don't we describe that mechanism, Jay? Because most people just think caffeine equals stimulant. How does that work?
Yeah, so the caffeine is an adenosine receptor blocker or antagonist. So adenosine is like a metabolic byproduct that builds up in the system over time. So you go about your normal day, you build up this adenosine, and then it creates a sleep pressure, which Matthew Walker, the sleep scientist, likes to use quite a lot. So that sleep pressure, when you have a big enough build-up, then you start to sort of feel a bit drowsy. It tells your body, okay, I've done a lot of stuff today. I need to go to sleep, so then I can help clear all that metabolic waste out of the system. We can go through learning, building those long-term memories that you accrue during the day, as well as reducing the emotional valence. So you have some horrible stuff go on during your day, you go to sleep, it helps to blunten that effect, so you have less traumatic memories, more learning. So anyway, the adenosine builds up, makes us go to sleep, but if you have caffeine in your system, it's going to block that receptor, which is going to result in you feeling a little bit more awake, because you're not having that sleep pressure build up.
Is it a little bit more awake or less sleepy?
Less sleepy.
Yeah. Because there are like, and I can sympathize with that. There are times when it's like, I'm not more alert and awake, I'm just not sleepy.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it as well. Cool.
Yeah, especially if you've ever done if you're trying to do an all-nighter, so you're studying or you've got a lot of stuff to get through, you smash a coffee and it just doesn't make you any smarter. Just makes you more irritable, just makes you stay awake. You're just
not sleepy. That's brain function is continuing to decline, but your level of sleepiness is flatlined or maybe declined somewhat. So you're essentially more stupid but still awake.
So it's fine if the job you're doing doesn't require any sort of mental faculty.
Also, the caffeine and adrenaline mechanism. Most people have a very kind of simplistic view of how it exactly works. So
go on.
So it's not that caffeine is actually a stimulant as such; it's that it's a neurotoxin, so it's toxic to our brain. And in an attempt to clear up the toxin from the body, the brain starts to engage in the upregulation or releasing more norepinephrine to basically speed the body to deal up with the toxin. So it's kind of one of those roundabout ways of clearing up a toxin. We get a buzz because it's toxic on our brain, not because we are necessarily directly. It's not like speed. right? It's not like speed where it's just boom, it's instantly acting to amp your heart rate up, speed up your system. It's more that it's toxic to our brain. So, that's quite important to note. So, the adrenaline is what's released, and when we release our adrenaline, our heart will start pumping harder, more in that fight or flight mode. So we are artificially inducing that somewhat, which is similar mechanism to many other stimulants, but that's kind of how it's functioning. So, it is important to be like, all right, if you're having absurd amounts of coffee, like sure, you've got the adenosine, we've got the adenosine mechanism, right? So sleepiness, but we've also got, okay, so how is this adrenaline thing working, right? So especially if someone is, the irony being that the people who tend to consume the most amount of caffeine tend to usually be kind of stressed already. So a good example of that is, I don't know, what do we call it, Jay? I don't know. Business
Type
people.
A.
Yeah, type A. Yeah, that's right. Type A. Go-getters, right? Conscientious, hardworking, bloody, opportunist go-getters and so on and so forth. Already living a fast life, already probably stressed out to the max, probably can't chill or sit down, and then just adding on that additional component. So, so when we're consuming coffee, we're also being like, okay, I'm amping up my adrenaline and I'm amping up my heart rate. So those are things that are important to note. What are some of the, because we want to unpack some of the negative possible side effects. So what are some of the negative possible side effects of impacting my ability to sleep, overcooking my heart rate, and overdoing my adrenaline? That's a better way to look at it from a health perspective versus just direct the product itself, right? Because the negative health consequences are likely to do with elevated long-term exposure to a substance which is preventing me from sleeping good, which is speeding me up and cooking my adrenals. Would that be a reasonable way to look at it, Jay?
Yeah, so there are going to be a few major components that will result in all these poor health effects long term.
Yeah.
So it's like chronic exposure to any drug is going to lead to long-term effects that will not be noticed in the short term. Since, like you mentioned earlier, like the short-term effects are, we're all fired up, we're getting stuff done. So we're very short-term, hyper-focused. We need to be productive, get what we can done today, worry about the side effects tomorrow. So I would say the constant stress on the adrenals is potentially going to cause a difficulty in being able to respond appropriately to stress in the future. And I'm not 100% sure on the actual mechanism here, but you do often hear of people talking about having, or their adrenals being cooked. I don't know.
I don't know about that either.
Scientifically, like a scientifically proven thing, because I often hear that that's not actually something that you can detect. But I know myself, if I have too much caffeine, so there's a bit more anecdotal here. If I have too much caffeine for too long, it results in me becoming apathetic, almost like I just don't respond as quickly or as appropriately to stresses. Like I lose motivation, dopamine levels plummet, and I'm just, and then I have to rely on coffee to get to a mediocre state of productivity. Start having more.
I'd probably say beyond a certain point, again anecdotal, beyond a certain point after, and maybe this is just how I respond. If I have too many coffees, I actually get tired, and I don't think it's because I'm physically tired. I just think that the effects of that caffeine have just completely ridden its capability for the day, or whatever it's done to my physiology is kind of peaked, and I'm actually entering some form of like overdose or fatigue from it. I'm inclined to like roll with that one.
You do hear about that a lot, eh?
That's my
Especially
assumption.
People who need it before bed.
Yeah, that's pretty strange, that one. But obviously, the goal of this conversation as well was to actually highlight some of the legitimate concerns and negative consequences of coffee. So, have you got any angles or avenues for us to discuss that we haven't yet touched on, bro?
I can go from an angle that is a little less physiology related. I'm
Absolutely.
concerned about the commercial aspect of coffee because it is one of the biggest industries in the world. It concerns me how the media is portrayed as in such a positive light. Too much of anything is going to be bad, and it doesn't seem like there is that much out there on the negative aspects of coffee, which caffeine, which is crazy because we all feel the negative effects. If I was to use myself as an example, so not being able to sleep if I have it too late, that one's pretty common. I get really jittery. I did a call with Fraser Beck, one of our close mates, yesterday, and I drank way too much caffeine that day, and I'm just jumping around. I can't sit still. I'm trying my best to sit still right now. It's got a poor effect on your social life if you're operating like that. Yeah, not being able to sleep. So if you can't sleep, then you're not going to be able to rest. Your short-term memory turns to shit. Long-term memory is not that great either. Develop that dependence on it. My gut gets sore. It makes my face go really red, as you can probably see here. Bring a lot of blood to the surface. Eczema gets really bad. Start getting itchy.
Okay.
So essentially, I start looking like a bit of a meth head.
Does it appear like it's wreaking havoc on your nervous and immune system? That sounds like for you it's particularly potent. Would that be right?
Yeah.
Because if you're having breakouts and your body's clearly having quite a significant response to it.
Yeah, it becomes the immune system becomes overactive to gut issues, and so anything that is touching my skin becomes oversensitive to that interaction, or anything I eat. Yeah, the gut disturbance. Anything I eat, I'll overreact to anything that is too high in sugar, dairy, any sort of bread. I just can't stand if I've dialed up my nervous system with caffeine. So I really need to be careful. I can't have caffeine and milk and bread at the same time because my skin will just flare up. I'll get covered in rashes. Yeah, and I'll end up running to the bathroom too. Otherwise, if I don't drink too much caffeine, I can shit. It's amazing. Some days you just eat whatever you want and you're like, what happened? It's like, I didn't have a coffee this morning.
Okay. Interesting. So I think you and I will be quite different in terms of our general responses to coffee because I consume a lot. I would consider myself a high consumer of caffeine. And I think there is, I would say that it's not the coffee that I'm not clearly addicted to the effects of it. And it's more the adrenaline component. I enjoy being speed up. So I enjoy the what would you call it? The stimulant effect. Absolutely. I love getting pumped up, and coffee does that. And especially that the first coffees in the day. And I like it really, really strong. So clearly my brain has a really positive association with getting pumped up and getting excited. And the other problem as well is like this, and there could be two ways to look at it. Maybe I've never been clear of coffee for long enough to determine whether or not it actually is optimal or good for me. But I haven't had a break from it in forever. So how am I meant to know if I operate better with or without it? I've never even given myself a chance, right? So I'm one of those people who, I'm lucky to go one day a month kind of without coffee kind of thing. Part of the sneaky part of it is like I don't tend to get too many negative consequences from it, so I just keep consuming it. So I wonder if that's a negative thing. I was considering, but then again, I'd have to test that. I'd have to have a break from it, which I'm not prepared to do at the moment.
A few weeks you'd have to give it.
Yep.
A few weeks before you'd actually be able to see what kind of effect it's having on you. I'm one of those people who responds quite quickly to the lack of it.
Yep.
It takes me about a day and a half before I start suffering. Before the headaches start coming in, I'll get severe migraines, sensitivity to light. It really is like I'm having a hangover.
Yeah.
I just become useless. And so when it's something that is so socially acceptable and the brief lack of it causes me to suffer to an extent that it's like I've poisoned myself with a bender of alcohol. That's of concern. It's of concern.
Let's consider this though. Would we say that for the general harmony, productivity, and cohesion of society and life and industry, would we say that coffee is probably better than alcohol? Probably. Number two, for our long-term health and well-being, is because is it probably better than say sugar? I'd probably say it is, in my opinion. And when I say sugar, I'm talking like sweet, sugary drinks.
Okay, yeah.
Because ultimately, people are just seeking a buzz. That's really the consumer. And the reason why people will never drink tea instead of coffee is because tea just doesn't have the effects as coffee. So maybe if we could make tea a more sexy beverage in that sense, or like have a bit more effects, then maybe people will drink it. But yeah, I'm wondering, are we going to see more literature come out on the negative consequences of coffee? And as you say, so long as it's like it's a giant industry now, but it's so how likely are we to see that? It's just like any highly valuable industries. You tend to get the funding happen internally, and so no one's going to really paint it with a bad brush. So what do we do about that, Jay?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems highly unlikely that we're going to get any sort of negative studies come through because I've gone out of my way to hunt because I like coffee, I like caffeine, I want it in my life, but I want to be better informed. I want to be able to see what it is that is actually doing to me long term. I want to see if there's any short term studies that coincide with the way that I'm feeling when I have it too much. And it's too hard to find. There's been times where I would find some studies and then they would just disappear. I wouldn't be able to find them again. And that bothers me. I'm sure they're just being drowned by all the positive studies. I'm sure it's not a conspiratorial thing. It'd be more that because of how big of the industry it is, the inherent bias that goes into these studies can't be ignored. If you're being paid to run a study on behalf of a company, so then it looks like there is no conflict of interest, the chances are that the study is going to come out positive.
Yeah. Yeah, bro. Also, like I'm not here to disprove the value of coffee or caffeine, because I'm going to assume this, but like for many people, it's perfectly fine. It doesn't seem to have much of an issue. But there's going to be a group of people who probably have far more reaction and response to caffeine. Like yourself, you appear to have a more intense response to it than say I do. So like, yeah, exactly. So if there are that subset of people that oh shit, I'm not sure what's going on here. Hey, maybe it should be a thing that we're, as you say, informed or to at least considered.
Most people love it, so they don't want anything to be wrong with it either. They don't want to hear that there are any issues.
And that can come down to an individual level. Like, are you in tune and intuitive with your body? Because if you love it and you operate fine, then for me, that's reasonable information to be like, yep, you're all right. If you love it and you're having reactions that are like significant, then you do need to be considerate. For me, Jay, it's like it's just like with food. If I eat too many shitty carbs, I feel terrible. I don't even eat. I barely eat fruit. I don't care what anyone thinks about that. I don't see the need for it. If I eat too many carbs, I feel terrible. If I eat a very, very high protein diet, I feel great. So, sure, that's not a perfect science at all, but there's an element of self-responsibility and understanding at play there. And same goes for the likes of caffeine. So, yeah, absolutely. Socially acceptable. Not everyone's going to respond equally to it. Caffeine is obviously different to food in the sense that we're dealing with. We should actually call it's a powerful stimulant. It's not a soft stimulant, it's actually powerful. And while we're here on topic, we won't go all down it, but let's touch on pre-workouts, because now we have There have been pre-workouts have actually been around for quite a long time now. People are actually, just not aware of it. They've been around since like the 2000s, early 2000s actually. So the pre-workout market has grown. For those who don't know what a pre-workout is, pre-workout are essentially pre-exercise powders and formulations that your body will pump up to train. Most of them are garbage, but over the years, more powerful substances have been banned, substituted, and taken out, and they've basically just filled that gap by increasing the caffeine to the point where there was this one I was looking at the other day, Jay, which is sold fucking over the county in New Zealand, 600 milligrams per serve of caffeine. 100. How many cups of coffees is in 600 milligrams of caffeine, Jay?
I don't know, because the coffee can range. It could be like 60 milligrams, it could be 80 milligrams. Some people say it's as high as 120.
Okay, what's an average double shot espresso? Because that's what most people drink.
Let's have a guess and
80
say
to 100?
80 maybe. Yeah.
About 80, cool. So let's go 80. Let's just go, okay, 6 8's 48. Or let's go more like 7, right? So these pre-workouts in one scoop, they're tending towards 7 coffees in one scoop. For those that don't know, it doesn't really matter, but I work at a gym, and 2 girls came in the other day and they're buzzing their tits off, and they're, excited about having some pre-workout. These are only some little girls as well. They're not large. So for anyone who has, any inkling on like physiology, like it's not your massive water and your massive muscle can really help you deal with issues. So if you're a big dude who's healthy, you can probably battle the effects of things. Just your body can kind of deal with it. It's clean it up a bit more, so to speak. But when you're a 20-something girl who's about 50 kilos and you're slapping seven coffee pre-workouts, that's going to have a serious effect on your body. And we also have, I think are they called the Zoomers? The kind of like 16 or 20-year-olds now. The really young guys. They're absolutely. What's that?
Are they
Gen Z or Zoomers or whatever.
I don't know.
They're about. Let's just say this. I'm basically just going to call you all the same. If you're 16 to 24, you're part of those like social media driven, can't think to help your life, respond to like whatever the new trend is, absolutely fucking abuse stimulants. And yeah, that's pretty normal now. You just got 16-year-olds just pounding 7 coffee pre-workout caffeines and just going for
it. and they neck it too. It's not like you sip a pre-workout over the next hour or so. Give it a spin, knock it back.
Yeah, mind you, I've been given advice on how to get the most potent effects for the pre-workout to the boys as well. I can't talk. Note to self, guys, if you're having pre-workout, you want to have it in warm water, and you want to have it just in a little bit of water so it gets in the system nice and quick and warm.
What about giving it a vortex?
Straight, that's right.
Get it down faster.
Don't dilute it. Just get in just enough to turn it into aqueous form. Get it warm and make sure it's well mixed, and then just boff it on an empty stomach.
Good to come on both sides here. Can't be all doom and gloom.
Yeah, you'll be pumping. Yeah, so yeah, I'm curious. I'm 36 now. I'm curious to see some of these maybe long-term side effects. I'm sure they're not drastic, but maybe there's some objectivity on the long-term possible. Let's say possible negatives or cautionary things to discuss, particularly on the form of coffee and caffeine.
Yeah, well, when it comes to pre-workout, I don't even think I'd be able to answer because there's just so much. We're putting so many different things in them now, and there's only a few ingredients that are actually useful. The caffeine, L-citrulline, beta-alanine, like don't bother putting anything else in. Maybe L-theanine or alpha-GPC to help
I think the L-theanine is good, bro.
Balance the caffeine.
Yeah, I like me and one of the boys, we make homemade pre-workouts, and basically, bro, it's caffeine, L-citrulline, L-theanine. And we use a substance that I better not chat about because it's a grey area product and it's very effective. But that's for another conversation. That's because it works. And we put salt in. We put a decent hit of salt, and we put raro in for sugar, because when you're training, you want some fast carbs, you want some salt straight in the muscle. That's bread and butter, and the L-theanine helps It really does. You notice it, Jay. It tapers that excessive fluck, that floaty yuck feeling you get when you have a lot of caffeine. It bloody does help. It really does. Which is quite cool to note and interesting. Maybe on a last note, like we'll move on to the last. But if you are going to be drinking, if you're like, I'm a coffee drinker, and as is billions of people around the world now. So if we're gonna be smashing coffee, what are some things we can do to at least buffer it, positively complement it, or offset maybe some of the negative side effects of it?
I guess we can just go with the simple ones.
Yep.
First one, don't drink it too late.
Yep.
Once it hits around about 3 o'clock for me, I try my best to avoid anything that's got caffeine in it.
I actually do as well, man.
Silly.
I actually do. I like, honestly, man, like despite my intense coffee habit, I'm pounding them in the morning and then I'm chilling, and like that one there that'll be my last one. It's 2 o'clock now. That I just finished that earlier. Yeah, I mean, there's no need.
Yeah, well, if you're going to spend so and so many hours every day at the gym or training, you're not going to get any sort of benefit from that unless you're recovering. And if you're going to mess with your recovery by drinking your coffee too late, then kind of it's counterproductive. You're just spinning your wheels every day. You're probably going to end up injured. So there's one. Ideally, you want to try and, if you're getting a coffee, try and find a cafe that doesn't overburn their coffee.
Common ground at Whānau, that's where it's at. All press is bullshit. They just burn the shit out of their beans and call it fancy. So, yeah. Any place that says dark roast, avoid. They're just lazy. All right.
And I will say another one as well, because you are going to be using a considerable amount of stored glucose from your body, you'll start to feel a little bit drained. So this might go against some people's recommendations, but I like having a banana with my coffee. So at least I've got some form of sugar there, because I find if I don't, I'll start to feel a bit weaker, especially if I'm training right after. I don't feel great.
This is for the healthy people, not for you unhealthy fatties who are smashing sugar. You don't need any more excuse to smash another slice. So this is for the normal healthy people, which is not normal anymore, actually. The rare healthy people, I should say, because everyone's really unhealthy now. So for the 10% of the population that have a handle on sugar, maybe a bit of sugar. Yeah? Cool.
Yeah. Reasonable. Just something. Just something in there. Something in the system. Yeah, definitely not a slice. Definitely not. Don't muck around with anything that's going to be hard to digest. Just yeah. Fruit is good if your body can handle fruit.
All right. Cool. All right. I think that's a great start on that coffee subject. So I wanted to touch on that today, guys, because it's relevant. I think coffee is the most widely used drug in the world. I think coffee is the number one addiction in the world. And I think people have an instinct of some of the negatives, but we could maybe look more broadly into, some of the, pros and cons of it, so to speak, with a more objective look into the possible cons. Yeah. But anything else you want to say, Jay, or can we wrap that one up there?
I think I just...
No, go. Please get in there.
If there's anything that can come from us rambling about coffee and trying to pull at straws at what's in the back of our memory is, I would like people to at least be more conscious about how their body's reacting to substances, and not to just fall prey to what they're told online, because there's so much.
Totally, bro. This comes back to what I would call, like individual first principles. Like don't walk through life not developing awareness of things and impacts on your body. And
it's okay to have nuance as well.
What's that?
It's okay to have nuance as well. Like, we're allowed to have things we like and we dislike, but we've got to know all sides of the story.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that goes, and Yeah, even more so today. And the only reason I say that is, our food is more nutrient empty than ever today. Our water is more toxic than ever today, and our environment is more toxic than ever today. And then I would probably also say the substrate of the ether of existence is among a world of competing signals, frequencies, and so on and so forth. So we're just assaulted on all ends from all sorts of damn things. So the rule number one is figure out how your body works and how it responds to things. Rule number one. Don't be a fool and tell yourself lies. Don't pretend it's not. Your body, your mind, your skin, your is a great projection of your health. So you can start there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's giving you messages. Everything you put in, everything you interact with, is just giving you a visible sign or a physical sign on whether or not something is good or bad. I could complain all day that my eczema is it's not fair. It's not fair. Why does this happen to me? Why do I look like a scaly monster half the time?
You could respond to or you could respond to the reaction with some sort of appropriate adjustment, couldn't you?
Yeah. Just pick up the phone, listen to the message.
Yeah, that's right. All right, cool. Let's wrap that one up. Cool. We don't need to waffle on about caffeine too long. We'll cool. Hopefully, people grab some value out of that. Team, me and Jay are gonna be running a few more. We're going to share it through various platforms. Hopefully, we'll run some shorts of anything that's of value. And our only intention here is to communicate unbiased, let's say, health and science communication. Ideally, yeah. Also, truth. We're going to get some shit wrong, and we're going to load some opinions, but we'll at least try to let you know when we're running with our own opinions or our own ideas.
Yeah, there should be room for that. There should be room for people's anecdotal data, their experience.
How far does science go if it only refers to the studies, Jay? You don't find new science referring to studies, all right? Someone has to break the mold, all right?
Yeah. Otherwise, we'll just stay as we are right now.
Correct.